Dear fellow personality decoding enthusiast, I don't know if you can relate to this, but I certainly can. And I feel like too often we're focusing on everything that's wrong with us, as opposed to everything that's right for us. And when we focus on what's wrong with us, it can be self-judgment when we're looking in the mirror, or we're looking at our bank account, or it might be others taking their frustration out on us because we fail to live up to their expectations. But much too often, I feel like we are focusing on all of the things that are wrong with us. Now, it seems that so much of what is right with us gets drowned in that noise, our past mistakes and what we perceive that has been wrong with us often tends to overtake all those things that are right with us. But today we are focusing on what is right with you. And to do that, I'm going to use the cognitive functions framework. And I'm also going to demonstrate what we may believe that's wrong with us, but what that function brings about in us that is actually really, really right. So at first, I'll talk about the judgment that is often perceived to go with these functions. And then I'll talk about why it's really important that we have those functions and what is really, really right about those functions. So let's start with FE, which is, of course, extroverted feeling, outward feeling, or what we call the unifier. And the judgment often with the unifier is that you're such a doormat. You shouldn't let people treat you that way. But what's actually right about the FE is that you have an open, truly caring heart, and you have the capacity to see the best in people. What would the world be like if we saw a little bit more of what's good in people? Okay, the FI, inward-facing feeling, or the ethicist. The judgment is often about the ethicist that you're too emotional and you're so selfish. But actually, what's really right about the ethicist is that you have an inner barometer about what is right and what is wrong, and you're not afraid to stand up against the misuse of power. What would the world be like if we stood up to misuse of power more often? Let's talk about the TI next, the introverted thinking, or the scientist. The judgment often about the scientist is that, you think you know everything. You're not as intelligent as you think you are. But actually, what's right about the TI is that you are able to create a flawless, thorough, and complex process that most people just don't have the capacity to understand. And what would the world be like if there was more capacity to bring a complex process into life so that it can work in a very simple way for people? You're needed. Then we have the extroverted thinking, the outward-facing thinking, or what we call the executive. And the judgment about the executive often is that, you have no emotions, you have no sense of humor, stop steamrolling everyone. But what the executive is really good at, and what is really right about you, is that you have the capacity to see this bigger picture and this bigger structure, and how to put elements together within that structure to create a more streamlined, effective system that creates more time and space and resource for people. And what would the world be like if we could embrace more time and more space and more resource? How incredible would that be? Now let's move on to the information collecting part of us. So we're talking about the sensory people first, so the introverted sensor, inward-facing sensor, or what we call the historian. And oftentimes, the historian is judged about being, you're stuck in your ways, you know, you don't like change, you never change, you don't want to hear new ideas. But what's really right about you as the historian or as the SI is that you know the tried and tested methods. You can reproduce the same results over and over and over again. And your predictability really sparks this sense of safety and security for other people who are around you. And what would the world be like if it was a little bit more predictable? I find that, especially in turbulent times in the world, we could use a little bit more of this predictability. Okay, outward sensing, extroverted sensing, or what we call the investigator. And outward sensing is often judged for, you know, being all about the pleasure in the moment. You know, you don't think about or care about the consequences of your behavior. But what's actually really right about the extroverted sensing, the investigator, is that you're able to stay present with what is right now. You can become this magnetic power, and your presence really inspires groundedness and draws other people to become present in themselves. And what would the world be like if we were able to stay present with ourselves and with other people? And then we have the intuitives, the extroverted intuition or outward facing intuition, or the pioneer. The judgment about the pioneer is often like, stop living in a fantasy world and get back into the real world. But actually what's really right about you is that you're able to see possibilities in any situation and come up with elegant solutions that solve problems, not just the original problem, but many other problems as well. What would the world be like if we had more elegant solutions, if we had more solutions that didn't just solve one problem, but many problems? And finally, we have the inward-facing intuition, or the witness. And the judgment often for the witness is, you're just imagining stuff. None of that stuff is going on. You just think you know what's happening, but you don't actually know anything. But what's actually really right about you as the witness is that you have the capacity to know what's being thought of without it being said. And you can often anticipate others' needs before they can. And imagine what the world would be like if we were able to flow freely within our relationships and have the capacity to understand the needs personally, in another person, and collectively. So, my dear, as you can see, there's so much that's right about you. So much that's right about you. And all that I've listed here, and there's so much more, is your natural capacity. All these things that are right about you are something that you can cultivate. You know, how you appreciate and nourish and nurture your natural capacity to grow will determine how healthy you are as your type. And I personally like to focus on the basics. I know a lot of people want to talk about, you know, this really big concept and this in relation to this and the complexity of everything. And I appreciate that too. But personally, where I've seen the most bang for the buck is in the basics of our type development. And why I want to do that is because without a good foundation, if we don't really become ourselves, actualize the basics, a house that's in the storm will crumble. So in terms of our personality psychology, if the basics are not clear and if they're not there, they're not established, they're not anchored into who we are, our psyche under pressure returns back into our old hurts and our old fears. So in order for us to really become who we are, we need to embrace the basics. Now, you may have heard of our 4 people within approach, and you've certainly come across the different people, titles of the different people that we talk about in today's video. And we view the cognitive functionalities as different people within us with different developmental stages. And with this approach, we're able to really attend to the needs of particular parts of us that might be struggling, and then resolve those negative situations and feelings more effectively, more efficiently, and with more compassion toward ourselves and others. So if you think about something like grief, something complex like grief, when you know who your 4 people within are, you are able to travel through and heal through your grief much faster because you're aware of what they need around the loss. Now, we're currently offering a free ebook, which you can get from sumiloff.com, on the 4 people within concept, on the very basics. So the 4 people within ebook, it really focuses on the basics of the method and the basics of each of the cognitive functions and how you can use them to make better decisions and really be there for yourself. As a cherry on top, my colleague Virpi and I will be running a series of ebook club calls to go through each of the 4 people within ebook chapters with other MBTI enthusiasts. So if you like books and if you like book clubs, then this might be something that you would like to consider. Now, there's currently no charge for these calls, so feel free to invite any friends as well who are MBTI enthusiasts to join you on this journey. So if you want to be a part of this bi-monthly experience, make sure to get yourself a copy of the ebook at sumiloff.com, and then we will let you know once we have the dates and the start times available for the book club. So keep an eye out for an email outlining all those dates. I want to say a big thank you, because you are such an advocate for this positive change in the world. You're helping us create a more compassionate and effective world. That's our 20 to 50-year plan. And I want to say that I see you. I see you, and I value your healing and development journey. You're doing such a great work. And your work matters. It makes a difference. You matter. Your well-being matters. And certainly together we have the power to affect this positive change on a global scale. It's very exciting. And I want to thank you for inspiring me to do this work. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again soon.